Welcome to Honoring Your Dreams. There's a wonderful poet named Mary Oliver who says, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Right? Beautiful way of phrasing it. So now we get to take a step back for a moment because we're usually just so focused on the survival tasks of the day that we often don't get time to step back and reflect on the bigger picture of what's most important to us and what we aspire, what we're hoping for, what we'd like to visualize, like my husband and my dream to be able to camp at the coast over the summer. So this chapter is about how your dreams are important. When asked for what makes a happy life, people spontaneously discuss their life goals, wishes, and dreams for the future. And cute quotes that little kids say about dreams. They tell us what's in our heart. They give us hope for the future about how we want to be better. They're like a map of where we're going, and they help us be focused on what we want, what's really important to us. Wisdom of kids. We've been learning from a lot of kids this semester. So our dreams, large and small, really do matter, and it helps for us to stay in touch with them. They're like a compass. They give us direction. They help us go green, right? They activate the frontal lobes to reflect on dreams, the prefrontal lobes. So they definitely are one of the strategies to shift out, to pattern interrupt and shift to something more inspiring. You know, what you don't want is a pointer to what you do want. So you just flip it. So it's like, I don't want this. So that's first, the frustration. I don't want this. But then it's like, well, what is it that I do want then? And that's a pointer. So that's one of the ways that we can identify what our dreams are. In Maslow's hierarchy, dreams reveal our desire to self-actualize, sort of to express the depths of what's inside of ourselves, right? What we really feel deep within us wants to be lived through us. And both big and small dreams are important. So the big ones and the little ones too, like the dream of having a really clean and beautiful closet, right? Something like that. And we all have these little dreams, right? So the little ones really matter also. So take a moment to jot a few of your dreams down. What are a couple of your dreams? Little ones, big ones, doesn't matter. What are a couple of your dreams? And if you draw a blank, that's okay. Sometimes when we go through great transition, when we're in the process of processing loss or big change, we might hit up and it doesn't occur to us what our dreams are. So there'll be some helpful inspiration here to remind us of help us retune into what our dreams are, because it's important. It's part of shifting out of, say, a flat state or a depressed state. It's moving to the next level of well-being. So dreams become goals that become action steps that open up new possibilities. And we can use things like atomic habits to make our dreams, reality, to put our dreams into actionable steps. They at first seem impossible, then improbable, and finally, when we commit ourselves, become inevitable. Mahatma Gandhi. I dream of an Africa which is in peace with itself. Nelson Mandela. So our lives are shaped by many factors that are outside of our control, but we still have a lot of influence on how we work through cycles of stability and change. That's how we work with resilience to help ourselves get through challenging times. We have influence on our ability to draw on teachers and mentors and our ability to take steps to realize our dreams. So what's a dream that you have made happen? Write one of those down. And I had invited you to do that for your opening exercise. So you could write the same one down or a different down, but what is a dream that you have made happen? One that I made happen was going to grad school. That was big. I never thought I could. And then I did. So it's really amazing when you do something that you didn't think you could do and then you do it. What is something you didn't think you could do and then you did it? So here's something interesting, and we're going to learn from some great teachers today, some really helpful insights. One of them is that it's normal to not know what our passion is, or to go through periods in life. Maybe we live a passion for a long time, and then, as I mentioned, we go through a crisis or a life change and we sort of feel flat and we might need to rediscover it. Or perhaps you're tuned into your passions, but you know people who aren't. So let's take a look at this video clip. It's a very good one on how to find.
I don't know what I want to do in life. How can I find my passion? And that's a pretty important question. So in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do just that. This episode was brought to you with the help of the guys at Skillshare.com. The first 350 people to click on the link in the description box below will get a 2-month free trial at Skillshare. Now, before we get started, I want to debunk something. A lot of us are under the assumption that there's only one thing out there that can be our passion, that it's predetermined by birth, and that all we have to do is find it. But that's not how it works. The truth of the matter is that there's probably many things that could potentially be your passion. In fact, it's entirely possible to have more than one passion. If you take a look at a lot of very successful people, you'll find that this is generally the case. For example, Tim Ferriss is a well-known author and speaker. But did you know that he was also a competitive dancer, wrestler, and investor? There's only 2 things you need to do in order for you to discover one of your passions. The first is that you must change where you get your dopamine from. Dopamine is the chemical that is released by our brain that motivates us to do things. Without it, you will literally starve to death, even if there was food right in front of you. The release of dopamine is also accompanied by pleasure. The problem nowadays is that dopamine is very easy to get. It's cheap and it's abundant everywhere. Back in the day, we had to do stuff in order to get that dopamine. And most of the time that meant creating something. You had to build a house. You had to create a nice piece of pottery. You had to go out and tend to your crops. While you worked on these tasks, you were flooded with dopamine and you felt good about the whole process. If you follow this route, you naturally become passionate about whatever it is that you did. But nowadays, it's a little bit different. We can now flood our brain with dopamine without having to do much at all. You can surf the web, you can binge watch some TV shows, you can order amazing food to your front door almost instantaneously. And methods like this have become the main sources of dopamine for the majority of people. Now, what's different? One of the most common questions.
Whoops. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to pause it here and take a look. So what he's talking about, dopamine is that chemical that makes us feel good about something, right? So it gives us a little bump. It's related to pleasure, but it's also really even more motivates to pursue pleasure, right? So we actually feel more dopamine on the pursuit. That's what's going on with the slot machines and stuff. So dopamine gets us up to get up and go do something. That's the whole idea behind it, is to pursue a goal. Okay, so what happens is that we get dopamine hits, little ones, when we turn on our Facebook and we get a like, or we scroll through TikToks and we're entertained. So in our video games give us dopamine hits. And so this media that we have so much access to, that's right in our laps. It's like, it's like stay healthy while you have cream puffs always in front of you, basically, is how we live right now. Every time you go into the grocery store, your survivalist circuits are tempted by the cream puffs, and somehow you're supposed to resist them all the time. Well, it's the same thing here. So these resources are in abundance that were not in abundance for our ancestors. So basically, dopamine hits are too easy for us, and we're getting them from these indulgent resources instead of from these pleasurable things, instead of from pursuing a goal and achieving the goal. Something that's important to us gives us a big dopamine hit. Creating something new gives us a big dopamine hit. I like to make these little holiday ornaments with my mom, and we get a little dopamine hit after creating one, right? It feels good to create one. So what he's going to be emphasizing here is a cardinal rule of life. It's a core rule of life these days, you guys. And that is, get your dopamine from creativity, not from consumption. And he uses the word consumption. And this is a great word to use because your generation is very aware of overconsumption of material goods. And so there's already a part of you that's programmed to sort of not like overconsumption, right? So you'll have more of a aversive reaction to that word than say indulgence. So you want to change how you get your dopamine, which is to switch, turn, pivot, and focus on the stuff that, and just use this motto: create instead of consume.
Are forms of creation. And this is a very important distinction. In order for something to be your passion, it must stem from creation. If you get the majority of your dopamine from a form of consumption, do you know what we call that? We call that an addiction. You're addicted.
It's not just an addiction. It's not just an addiction. It is a recipe for what nihilism, right? For the whole feeling of what's the point? Well, that is exactly, there was a whole school of pleasure seekers in ancient Greece, the Epicureans, and they appreciated pleasure, but it can lead to because pleasure is great, but it's not fulfilling enough by itself. It's valuable. I mean, pleasure is valuable. It's a gift. But, loving the taste of certain foods, loving the feeling of a hug, pleasure is a gift, but it's not meant to be the only gift and the only place where we put our attention, especially with these easy pleasures, right?
Addicted to watching TV. You're addicted to smoking cigarettes.
So
you're addicted to eating junk food. But on the other hand, if we get the majority of our dopamine from a form of creation, that's called the passion. You're passionate about drawing. You're passionate about dancing. You're passionate about farming. So the first and most important thing you have to do in order to find your passion is to turn back your consumption valve. Watch less TV, play less video games, eat less junk food. When you turn back your consumption valve, you force yourself to start looking for dopamine from forms of creation. This is crucial for our next step. The second thing you have to do in order to find your passion is to simply expose yourself to a variety of different forms of creation, to give yourself a chance to get dopamine from these sources instead of forms of consumption. Now, there's no fancy trick to finding these things. You just got to approach it the old-fashioned way, by trying things out. So what I suggest you to do after successfully completing step number 1 is to search up a list of hobbies. Literally, go on Google and type in list of hobbies, Wikipedia. Look through the list, and if you see anything that seems even remotely interesting or fun, write it down. Create a list. Then all you have to do is take this list and ask yourself, which thing would I like to try out first? You should.
Yeah, and try it out. And then you can ask yourself, what do I want to get really good at? Because you can get really good at something in 5 years. Okay, so what are a couple of things I'd like to get really good at in my life is another way of looking at it.
Only try out one of these hobbies at a time. You must give yourself enough time to see whether or not you can make this hobby into a passion. If you've successfully followed our first step, which is to drastically tone down the amount of dopamine you get from forms of consumption, what happens next should be automatic. Let's say you picked photography as something you might be interested in. If you followed our first step correctly, you'll naturally do some research on photography. You'll look up some videos, you'll start playing around with a cheap camera or your phone, and after a while, you'll know whether or not you actually like this hobby. All of this is fueled by the dopamine that you are no longer getting from forms of consumption, because you're now getting it from a form of creation. And let's say you don't find yourself interested in photography, all you have to do is move on to the second thing on your list. And if that doesn't work out either, try the third thing, and so on and so on. And if you continue to find yourself not interested in anything, then chances are you're not following the first step properly. You have to turn down the amount of dopamine you get from forms of consumption even more. Now, I know this sounds overly simplistic, but finding a passion isn't as hard as people make it seem. Honestly, all you have to do is tone down the amount of dopamine you're getting from sources of consumption and allow yourself to explore different forms of creation.
Ta-da! Okay, and then there's another ad for Skillshare. So good one, huh? So write down your favorite insight from that video, everybody. What was your favorite insight? Now, remember, what we want to remember is get our dopamine from creation, not consumption. Turn down that consumption valve and expose ourselves to ideas, right? Explore ideas, right? Different ways. And all of these different areas that you explore, that you find interesting for hobbies or interests, and this can happen throughout life, right? So later in life, you have a career and you have a hobby. Like my husband, for example, he was a major adventurer, constantly on the go adventuring, but then he ended up with some major disabilities in his body, so he can't do the kind of physical adventuring he used to do. So now he does it through flight. He flies those remote controlled planes and drones, so he can experience flying from first person view that way, right? So you got to stay creative throughout your life, because our life changes. Everything's always changing, and we'll go through dives when things shift, and we have to look for new things that inspire us. So here's two approaches to making dreams practical. One of them is adding what we like, are good at, and value to the three domains of life: love, work, and play. And the next one is Ikigai, the Japanese practice for filled life. We're going to look at Ikigai we're going to look at love, work, and play first. So one of the ways we can gain some clarity on our dreams is by reflecting on the three main domains of life. So you could write these down: the domain of love, the domain of work, and the domain of play. And these are each big categories, right? So there's a lot of things within those categories. So you can just reflect on which of these categories would you like to grow. Which one would you like to, perhaps you would like to add some new friendships into your life, or you want to get a new job, or train for a new job, or start doing some kind of volunteer acts of service, or perhaps you need more play in your life. So just notice which domain of your life could most use with some infusion of growth and transformation. Love, work, and play. Love, work, and play. And then we can think about how can we bring more of what we enjoy, what we're good at, your strengths that you looked at last week. How can you bring your strengths to this? Because one of the things that Seligman found, he's that learned helplessness to learned optimism guy, is that people who use their strengths often throughout the day feel good. They feel satisfied. They feel a sense of satisfaction. So we want to use our strengths often throughout the day. You may have found that if you've had a job where the environment calls on your strengths, that feels really good. But if you have a job where the environment doesn't call on your strengths, it doesn't feel good. I have a sister who is extremely exuberant, effusive, tons of energy, very gregarious, very playful, a little bit loud, right? Perfect K through 12 teacher, right? But she worked in a bank and she was miserable. It was not a match for her skills. So you can think about each of these domains. How can I make it more of a match for what I'm good at? Or how can I bring more of what I'm good at to that environment? And then what you value, the things you care about that are most important to you. So we can think about how we can bring more pleasure to our world of love, our world of work, more playfulness, infuse it with more playfulness, how we can bring more positive, pleasurable things to the world of work. I think this is why the coffee shop thing has gotten so huge, is I think that it has become a way for people to bring pleasure to work, to add some pleasure to work. They can have their wonderful mocha, right, while they're doing the accounting project or whatever. So it adds that, but we can be creative about how we can do that, right? How we can bring the strengths that you listed to love, work, and play, and how you can bring things that you value and that are important to you. And the Japanese art of Ikigai guides us on how we can bring what we value, what's important to our heart, to love, work, and play, these three domains of life. So Ikigai is a Japanese word that it's a concept that means a reason for being. So depth of meaning, purpose, right? Refers to having a meaningful direction or purpose in life, which we can't get from just pleasure alone, right? It comes from, this is what Maslow meant by self-actualizing, doing things that matter to your heart, listening to your heart and expressing what's important to your heart. constituting the sense of one's life being made worthwhile, with action taken towards achieving one's Ikigai, resulting in satisfaction and a sense of meaning to life. So what is our Ikigai? So the Japanese secret to a long and healthy life. On the Japanese island of Okinawa, where Ikigai has its origins, is thought to be home to the largest population of centenarians, 100-year-olds in the world, and they are still happy. So here's the process of discovering your Ikigai. So start by drawing, taking a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and drawing, breaking it into 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you do this for your assignment. So it's great to do it now while you're doing the video, and then you can just snapshot a picture of it up and upload it, or you can type it in. But in the first quadrant, you write down, what do you love? What brings me enjoyment to do? What puts me in flow? In the second quadrant, you write down, what am I good at? What are my skills and abilities? What am I naturally good at? And one of the first 5 things you want to write down are your strengths that you identified last week. So they should show up on there. And it's good for you to, if you forgot what they are specifically, to go back and remember them, because you want to use your strengths daily in your life. You want to apply them to your life. What can I be paid for? You make a list there. And what does the world need? What do I want to strengthen in the world? So let's take a few moments while you're filling in those quadrants. What do I love? What am I good at? What can I be paid for? And what does the world need? Okay, and then let's watch this neat video on Ikigai. 5 minutes.
Hey there! Today we're going to teach you how to find your Ikigai. So what is Ikigai? Ikigai is a Japanese concept that roughly translates to a reason for being. A lot of people relate Ikigai to finding a purpose in life, but it's not an end goal. It's a process of discovery. You may or may not be able to find your Ikigai today, and that's okay, because the whole point of this exercise is to just get started. Why should you find yours? We all want to be happy, but most of us have no idea what we want to do. Finding your Ikigai means having a purpose in life that fulfills not just your desires, but the world's needs as well. And if it's something you love, you'll naturally want to do it repeatedly every day. The recommended time for this exercise is 30 minutes. When you're writing, try not to spend too much time thinking. Just write down whatever that comes into mind immediately. You can also do this exercise with your friends, but don't discuss with them until everyone has completed the exercise. Remember to assign one person to mention the prompts for every question. Ready? Let's start. Step 1. Get a notebook and draw a horizontal line across 2 pages. This will divide the pages into 4 sections. It will represent the 4 circles we drew previously for the Ikigai diagram. Step 2. Starting from the top left section, write down these headers in every section and go in a counterclockwise manner. What do you love? What are you good at? What can you get paid for? And what does the world need? Next, you can start filling the sections one by one. Try to take just around 3 to 5 minutes to complete every section. Let's start with the easiest section. What do you love? Here are some prompts to help you think. Feel free to pause the video to refer to them. What have you never gotten bored of? What's something you've always been drawn back to do over time? What gets you in the flow that you forget to eat or drink when you do it? Once you're done, you can move to the next section. What are you good at? What skills have you been spending time to practice? What do people look to you for help with? Is there anything you want to be good at? Next up, what can you get paid for? What have you been paid for before? What would you be doing if you're not in your current job? What do you want to get paid for? Finally, this is the section that most people find the hardest to answer. Let's change it up a bit so that it's not so overwhelming. Instead of what the world needs, think about your world. Think of your immediate society and community, the reality you live in. How other people like? What do they need? How can you contribute to create a positive effect on those around you? All right, take a look at all of the sections and see if there's anything you'd like to add. If not, we'll move on to the most exciting part of this video, finding your Ikigai. It's really simple. All you need to do is to find one thing that's common in all 4 sections. In this case, it would be writing meaningful stories. Congratulations, you've found your reason for being. But it isn't always that simple, is it? Not all of us find our Ikigai immediately after doing this for the first time. Some will take days, others might take months, and that's all perfectly okay. Remember, finding your Ikigai is a constant process. Take your time, ask yourself tough questions, and answer them honestly. Always be open to try new things, because you never know how much you love something until you actually do it. Your purpose in life is not fixed forever, so feel free to do this exercise as many times as you want, and keep exploring different possibilities. We hope you'll find your Ikigai, and we'd love to hear from you when you do. Share your progress and remember to tag us. We love featuring content from our community.
Okay, pretty neat, huh? It's a really neat method to explore. So you can ask not necessarily what the world needs, what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. I love that quote by Howard Thurman. So here is a picture of the Ikigai in terms of the 4 quadrants: what you're good for, what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. So you can see here it's a combination of passion, profession, vocation, and mission. And it's an ideal when you're able to converge all 4 into your career, right? So this one is about following our curiosity and being willing to explore. So you can see here, our intuition and curiosity are powerful internal compasses. So it's neat to see yourself as almost like a treasure hunt. And so you discover that you're into something, right? You discover that you enjoy doing something. You don't consciously create that you enjoy doing something. So you're always discovering, and it's neat to approach with a sense of wondering and with child's mind, with this open, playful mind throughout your life, so that you can open up to new ways of being. Because if you get bored, this is the time to open up. So here are 10 rules for Ikigai happiness. Okay, and we can watch the little video of them, but I'm going to run through them really quick with you here, and just notice which one speaks to you the most. Stay active, don't retire, leave urgency behind and adopt a slower pace. And if you would share in the chat which one of these most speaks to you right now. Eat only until you're 80% full, surround yourself with good friends, get in shape through daily gentle exercise. The reason why only 80% full is because food will expand and the stomach needs room to digest, or it stretches. Smile and acknowledge people around you. Reconnect with nature. Give thanks to anything that brightens our day and makes us feel alive. Live in the moment and follow your Ikigai. So one of these will speak to you. And it's really interesting that that is so. And that is one of the ways that we discover ourselves, that we continually discover who we are. So which of these most is speaking to you right now? Sometimes we can be surprised or amused by which one we might find ourselves drawn to. For me, it's leave urgency behind. Yeah. Ten rules for Ikigai happiness. So what is one simple thing you could do or be today that would be an expression of your Ikigai? For me, it would be make people laugh, make people around me laugh, because certainly one of mine is to uplift the people around me. And that's neat because it's neat to take the step back and realize that, because I get very caught up on my to-do list and I can easily forget to make the people around me happy, to lift them up, to tell them a joke or tease them or say something I know will make them feel good, or ask them a question I know will make them feel good. People love to talk about what they're passionate about. So if we really show interest, right, in what they're passionate about. So here's some tips and encouragements. You've heard me say this one before, and that is that 5 years are going to pass. What do you want to have either completed at that time, or what is something you want to get really good at in 5 years, right? So I use this as a touchstone for myself all the time. It's really helpful. Just, okay, over the next 5 years, because it's a block of time that allows room for major events, right, to throw you off track for a while, and then you can get back on track, like we have been, very aware of over the last 2 years, those events that can throw us off track, that require our attention, to deflect our attention to them for a while. But it's so helpful to just really think about, what do you want to do over the next 5 years? Because you can get extremely good at something in 5 years. And that's kind of a fun thing to think about. It's another approach to, what do I want to get good at in my life? What are some of the things I would like to master in my life? Another thing we can do, and I like this, I'm drawn to this, and that is see a dream as living through us, that it wants to be expressed and live through us. I know someone, for example, who feels called to write children's books, and this is a calling. This is something that wants to be expressed through you. And as a Jungian, Jung thought that these things, just like Plato thought, have an energy of their own, right? So sort of like many great musicians say that the song wants to be written through me. I don't really write the song so much as be the source of the song allowing itself to be written. So I like that way. It's an imaginal approach, and I like that imaginal approach. Let your dreams carry you along. Give yourself over to your aspiration. This is another way of sort of thinking about or perceiving. And these perceptual approaches are really important. Just like with that slam poet, Katie Mackay, who talked about pretty, you'll never be, defined by just 5 letters. I know it's 6 total letters, but it's 5 specific letters with one of them duplicated. So you'll be pretty amazing, pretty incredible, pretty loving, that kind of thing, which reframes pretty for us, right? So this is that same kind of thing, how we perceive something, how we think about it. And this is a way to approach sort of almost a surrendering over to your dream. Make what calls you important to you, put it in front of you. The eyes attract a lot of attention. What's in front of our eyes gets a lot of our attention. So you can honor it with some attention and some energy by writing it down, making a collage about it, finding a way to bring it to mind each day, having a symbolic representation of it in front of you, creating a blueprint for it or a storyboard for making it happen, and identify people and resources and knowledge that can help you achieve your goal. What do I need to learn to make this happen is a question I like to ask myself. Like, one of the things I really want to play around with doing is animation. So what do I need to learn? Where can I find sources of learning to do animation? So obstacles to dreams are naysayers, avoiding risk, and worries about connection or safety. And one of the things that Rick Hansen talks about is what we dread is usually rooted in childhood and often much less likely as an adult. So do we play small? The ways that we shrink, we can encourage ourselves to inch out a little bit more, to expand a little bit more. And I like the idea of expanding with a generous heart, expanding by giving, right? So we want to create things, and these things are gifts, right? We can ask ourselves, is there something I feel nervous about doing? Am I feeling nervous about that? And how can I encourage myself to expand into it a little bit, right? Like feeling nervous about taking a college class and finding people that will encourage you to expand into that new reality. Remember, the hero is always transforming, right? Becoming bigger. The yin and yang, the juxtaposition of opposites, pursuing big dreams with commitment while being at peace with whatever happens. So this is a famous approach of going all in and then letting go of the results, right? So putting it all in there, but allowing it to be, understanding that there's a lot more variables in the world than this push, and so sometimes we'll be thrown off task, and being able to go with that flow as well. We've learned about the growth mindset, focusing more on learning and growing than on the end result, right? So gaining through the journey itself, as well as, the goal is like a light that we move towards, but we don't forget to enjoy the path itself too. Redefine failure. The more willing we are to allow ourselves to make mistakes, I've really learned the value of this, that we need to be able to be okay with making mistakes, that we're not perfect, that letting go of perfectionism. Let's take a breath in and just allow ourselves to relax with this idea that we don't have to be perfect, where we'll be there for ourselves in our beautiful imperfection. Remember, the heroic journey characters are imperfect. Check out what Michael Jordan says himself about failure.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Failure is good. Making mistakes is okay. And we can learn to be with ourselves on that and support. I find that when, I used to be very sensitive to criticism from people I'm close with. And now if I find that what's important is that I be there with myself while I'm hearing them say something. And they say small things. It's not like I'm being scathingly criticized. This is just, I don't like it when. So if I'm there for me, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. While you're listening, we can take this in, allow ourselves to realize that we're just one small being. It's actually arrogant to try to be perfect. So keep the essence of a dream alive rather than giving up on dreams. We can bring to the essence of what they are. That doesn't make any sense. More like connect with. One of my fantasy dreams is to be I would love to be able to be a singer. But no, being a lounge singer, no, but I can sing, right? I can sing, and I learned how to sing. I used to be a crappy singer, but I learned how to sing. My son taught me how to sing, and now I can sing, and I'm not afraid to sing, and I sing all the time, and I get a lot of joy from singing. So it doesn't always have to be the epitome. Everything, we don't always have to be the most famous person in the world at it to be deeply fulfilled by it. We can do it right here. And the essence of doing things right here in community is really the essence of it. We're completely misled by massive stardom. We're tribal, we're local tribal beings. So our dreams can have many sizes, right? And we can hold ourselves lightly. Preoccupation with the self feels tense and undermines support from others. So practice holding things lightly, right? We don't need to cling too tightly like Gollum. This is a great quote. Sometimes we have to let go of the life we've been living to make room for the life that's waiting for us. said by someone cool, I forget. So make offerings. We can see that we can think of the ways that we live, work, and play that are kind of offering to others. So think about what you give, large and small, as offerings, little givings. Thinking of the things you do as offerings helps them feel lighter, more heartfelt. I know you guys know people who, suggest things, but they're not really suggestions. They become expectations. So this is countering, and that's when we push too hard, right? And we're all vulnerable here and there to pushing too hard. So we just want to gentle that back and just see them as offerings that can be more lightly held rather than insistences. Using discernment, clarifying what is and is not our task, job, duty, or purpose with a particular purpose or setting so that we don't feel overly burdened. We can go back to the Stoic circles with this. What is in my control? What isn't in my control? And there's a great phrase, I'll send this out soon, that Rick Hansen shares in one of his Just One Thing talks, and that is the freedom not to. I don't have to. I don't have to eat that fifth cookie. I don't have to. A lot of times my mind like churns into this idea that I have to do. I have to get this much done when I really don't have to get that much done. It's an expectation that I'm putting on myself that sometimes doesn't fit with what happens in reality, with demands that surface, needs that surface, right? So there are certain things that we do have to do, but I don't know if you're like me, that there are some things where I put that on myself where doesn't need to be as big as it is. So this idea that I don't have to fill in the blank, and we can ask ourselves, is this something I really have to? Especially, I've been using this, especially when I feel that inner urgency or that push. And then I know that energy of things need to get done has sort of gotten too much momentum, and now it's like it's pushing too hard, and I can take a breath, cleanse my brain and body, release some of that tension, and ease back, open up, right? Decontract, open up. Really good. So letting go. Find fertile ground is really important. So we don't have to share our dreams with people who are just going to cut them down. Probably better to not. Probably best to share your dreams with people who are going to support and encourage you. And support and encourage in, of course, realistic ways. But people will interpret our dreams based on their perception of what's possible. And the ultimate example of someone who just ignores everybody else's idea of what's possible and follows his own, is whether you like him or not. He does do this, is Elon Musk, right? He's just like, yes, I'm going to do a rocket that lands, that flies home. That's an extraordinarily innovative thing. So we can find those who will support our dreams. So make sure we find fertile ground, who can use what we've got, what setting of activities bring out the best in us, and what kind of person appreciates us. We can open up to those kind of environments more. A great way to do it is to get involved with one of two kinds of groups, because the world will expand from there. Support group. Support. This is like when you could use, like, if you have, like, we have friendship circles, and then a lot of times, sometimes those friendship circles are really healthy, but sometimes we can be surrounded by people who are struggling and are not necessarily in a healthy place, in which case we want to branch and expand to new circles. You can make decisions over how you want to deal with the other circles, whether you want to keep the people in your life or begin to shift, but you definitely want to expand so you've got people who nourish you. And support groups are very nourishing, and there are lots of ways to find support groups. There's all kinds of clubs and groups that have support groups, and online support groups are good too, because no matter what kind of expanding you're doing, you're opening to the new, and opening to the new tends to continue the process of more new coming your way. And the other is hobby groups, people who share your common interests. And even if you just find a Reddit club of people who are also into, making video games or doing animation art or whatever it is, you're adding this new energy in, and that will continue to expand. You'll find, you'll hear about a meetup that's happening and so on. Now, this one, zoom out perspective, zoom out, get the bigger picture, because our feed is really limited. So this is a really interesting video. We have all kinds of assumptions about these topics, about life expectancy, the gap between rich and poor, which it's definitely getting worse in this country, but not worldwide. Poverty levels, percent of world population that lives in poverty compared to just 1990, which is about when my son was born. Obesity, child mortality, traffic accidents, violent crime, and countries that are democracies. So with the news feed is designed to get your attention, and it uses your survival-based brain, fight or flight, to do that. Fortunately, there's others that do it, other ways like humor, that get some more green part of our brain going. But the news feed can leave us with the wrong impression. So let's check out this summary of actually how we're doing in the world.
We're a bit lacking at the moment. It's just a little bit of optimism about, the future of humanity. In one recent survey, only 7% of British people said they thought the world was becoming a better place. And if you turn on the news, well, it's not that hard to see why people might think it's all doom and gloom.
Russia's new invincible nuclear-powered missile. The news is becoming more advanced and threatening societies around the world.
Scientists say climate change is getting worse.
It turns out that being a pessimist is actually a big mistake because, well, it just doesn't fit the facts. Comparing our lives now to in the past, they've improved by almost every meaningful measure. Huge numbers of people around the world are living longer, safer, more prosperous lives. Compared to someone living just after World War II or even the last few decades, many of us, believe it or not, we've never had it so good.
Let's start with one of the most basic measurements, the length of your life. Take the average person born in 1950. Well, they can expect to live for just 50 years, but someone born now can hope to live more than 2 decades longer, to 72. Now, this is partly down to huge advances in medical science.
This is around the world.
Also because the gap between rich and poor countries is getting smaller. That's because people in the poorest countries have gained the most. They can expect to live more than 30 years longer than they could in 1950, which pushes the average up. Now, that doesn't mean everything's great. There's still massive inequality between different parts of the world, and also between rich and poor people in the same country. But extreme poverty, that's defined as having $1.90 a day to live on. That's also becoming rare. The World Bank estimates that 10% of the world's population live in extreme poverty, compared to more than a third in 1990. Okay, so we're living longer and with more money. But are we healthier? Well, by working together, we've managed to eradicate some of the world's deadliest diseases. Take smallpox, for example. It used to kill millions every year, mostly in developing countries. Now, it's a thing of the past, thanks to medical science and huge international cooperation. And doctors think they could soon wipe out many other potentially fatal diseases like polio, measles, and rubella. But one thing that's getting worse is obesity. With the rise of junk food and unhealthy diets, it's almost tripled since 1975, and it might continue to get worse in the future.
One key indicator of public health is child mortality. That's the number of babies born, but who don't survive the first few years of their life. The tragedy of losing a child, sometimes many children to illness, was simply a fact of life for people all around the world before modern medicine. Now, thankfully, it's becoming rarer.
In most developed countries, child mortality rates for under fives have fallen by more than 90% since 1950. In the least developed countries, deaths have fallen by more than 80%. This is one of the reasons life expectancy has shot up so much. The more people who die young, the lower the average lifespan. Some people think we're a bit too obsessed with health and safety these days, but tighter rules and regulations have paid off. We're less likely to get killed at work or by a car accident or plane crash than ever before. In the late 1970s, about one passenger flight in every 250,000 ended in a fatal accident. Now the chance is around 1 in 4 million. That's 16 times safer. And in Britain, your chances of dying in a road traffic accident have dropped by around 2/3 since the early 80s.
How likely is it that you'll be the victim of a violent crime? Well, of course, it depends on where you live and loads of other factors, but analysis of historical statistics suggests that, for Europeans at least, this is the safest time to be alive ever.
Criminal court records in England go back to the 1200s, when around 20 people per 100,000 could expect to be violently killed. Now the rate is around 1 in 100,000. Hundreds of historical records tell a similar story right across Europe. A massive long-term decline in homicides since the Middle Ages. Let's be clear, if you want to find bad news about climate change, there is plenty to choose from. The rapid industrialization of the 20th century was driven by the burning of fossil fuels. Levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have soared and global temperatures have risen. The evidence is undeniable. Satellite images show how the ice around the North Pole is melting year on year and how sea levels are rising by around 1 inch every 8 years. But there are some glimmers of light in the gloom. Carbon emissions in Britain, the US, and other advanced economies have been falling over the last 20 years. The world is capable of taking tough action when countries agree on the science and pledge to work together. In 2015, there was another great example of international cooperation when 195 countries signed the Paris Agreement, promising to work together to limit global warming.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.
2 years later, President Donald Trump of the United States, the country with the second biggest carbon footprint, pulled out of the agreement. And he's just one of a string of populist nationalist leaders who've come to power around the world in recent years. Some commentators fear for the future of democracy itself, amid stories about dark money and how social media manipulation is influencing elections. But if we take the long view, there are good reasons to think the world is making progress. Nearly 60% of countries are democracies. That's a record high. And only 13% are autocracies, a post-war low. Historically high numbers of people, more than 4 billion, that's more than half the population of Earth, now live in countries that hold free and fair elections.
Let's be clear, the world still faces massive challenges. We're a long way from solving climate change or poverty or disease. But if there's one thing history tells us, it's that people are capable of rising to the biggest challenges that once seemed insurmountable when we work together.
So one of the interesting things about that video, obviously, is that it shows us that there are a lot more things going better than we probably thought, right? How many of you are surprised by some of the statistical information and that it gives you a bit of a different perspective, which is super important so that we have a more rational perspective on things. So that's it, everyone. That's our lecture for today. Your dreams matter. How can you honor them?